There is one document you can pull up in about 5 minutes that, for a large number of people over the age of 65, leads directly to a higher Social Security payment, not a one-time check, not a reimbursement of any kind. We are talking about receiving a meaningfully larger deposit every single month for the rest of your life. And the reason most people never collect that money has nothing to do with whether they qualify. It is simply that nobody ever told them this document existed or pointed them to the one specific thing inside it they actually need to examine. Because here is the piece that carries the most weight, and it is also the piece almost nobody slows down long enough to explain. Just pulling the document up is not what increases your payment. It is knowing precisely which section to look at once you have it open. Miss that section, and you walk right past money that belonged to you the entire time. So in this video, I am going to tell you exactly what this document is, where to find it, and the specific thing to look for inside it that can add real money to your monthly payment. I am also going to walk you through the errors that are silently shortchanging millions of Social Security checks right now, who is most likely to have one of those errors sitting on their record at this very moment, and the straightforward form that corrects it. Stay with me all the way through, because toward the end, I am going to share several additional ways to increase your monthly payment beyond simply fixing a mistake. And at least one of them applies to nearly everyone watching this right now. This is real money. It is your money. And by the time this video ends, you will know exactly how to go claim it. I am an estate attorney, and for more than 15 years, I have sat across from retirees reviewing their finances line by line. The single most consistent pattern I have seen throughout that entire career is honest, hard-working people receiving less each month than they actually earned, because of a number sitting on a government record that no one ever thought to verify. These individuals worked their entire lives for that benefit, and a quiet error, sometimes one that is decades old, has been trimming their payment the whole time without them ever suspecting a thing. I am going to make sure that does not happen to you. What the document is. Let me start with what this document actually is, because once that is clear, everything else clicks into place. The document is your Social Security statement. It is completely free. It lives inside an online account called My Social Security on the official government website at ssa.gov. If you have never created an account there, the setup takes about 5 minutes. And once you are logged in, your statement is right there waiting for you. Inside that statement is something the overwhelming majority of people have never once looked at in their entire lives: your complete earnings history. Every single year you ever worked and paid into Social Security, going all the way back to your very first job, possibly back to your teenage years, with a dollar figure recorded beside each one. Now, here is why that history is the foundation of everything your payment is built on. I want you to really absorb this part, because it is the core of everything that follows. Most people assume Social Security looks at their most recent years of work, or just takes some rough average of their lifetime earnings. That is not how the system actually operates. What Social Security does is identify your 35 highest earning years. It adjusts each of those years for inflation. It averages them all together. And then it runs that average through a specific formula to produce your monthly payment amount. That 35-year average is everything. It is the single most important number in your entire Social Security calculation. Your entire check is built from it. Let me make that concrete. Picture just one of those 35 years, a year when you were working full-time and bringing home solid wages, showing up on your record as a zero or as half of what you genuinely earned. That deflated figure gets folded in alongside all the other years and pulls the entire average downward. And because your payment is calculated directly from that average, one corrupted year quietly reduces every check you will ever receive. It is like one failing grade dragging down a lifetime grade point average, except this average determines the income you have to live on. That is exactly why people who correct even a single year so frequently see a meaningful increase. They are not receiving some kind of bonus. They are finally being paid what the work they did always warranted. And the only place in the world where you can actually see the raw year-by-year figures behind your payment, the real underlying data going back across decades, okay, is that statement. Your benefit is calculated from those numbers, but you never get to see them unless you open this document. Think about that for a moment. The most financially significant number in your entire retirement is constructed from information you have never been shown and that no one has ever asked you to confirm. Why errors exist. So why does reviewing this statement lead to a larger check for so many people? Here is the reason. Every single number in that earnings history came from payroll reports that your employers submitted over your entire working life. Decades of paperwork filed by every company or organization you ever worked for. And sometimes those reports contained mistakes. A year where your employer entered the wrong earnings figure, a year where the amount recorded is dramatically lower than what your paychecks actually added up to, a year that registers as zero when you know with complete certainty that you were working throughout that entire period. Each one of those errors pulls your 35-year average lower dollars, which means the monthly payment you are living on right now is smaller than it is supposed to be. And we are not talking about trivial amounts. According to the Social Security Administration's own data, a single year of missing or inaccurate earnings can reduce your monthly benefit by approximately $100. Let that settle in for a moment. One incorrect year, $100 a month. That is $1,200 every year. And stretched across a 20-year retirement, that single mistake on a single line you never knew existed quietly cost you around $24,000. If 2 or 3 years on your record are off, you multiply that figure right out. And here is the part that should make you both frustrated and motivated to do something about it. The Social Security Administration does not correct these errors on your behalf. There is no automatic review process. There is no alert system. No letter arrives in your mailbox saying your record may contain an inaccuracy and you ought to take a look. The data gets entered, your payment gets calculated from it, and unless you personally open that statement and compare it against your own recollection and your own records, the error simply sits there, silently, reducing your check year after year. The money does not come looking for you. You have to be the one to go find it. Who is most at risk? Now, you may be wondering whether you are actually someone who could have one of these errors on your record. Let me tell you exactly who is most likely to have money sitting there unclaimed right now. Because if you recognize yourself in this list, you need to go and check this week without delay. First, anyone who worked for a small business, particularly during the 1980s and 1990s. During that era, a large share of payroll was managed manually by an owner working from a paper ledger, and honest mistakes were far more common than they are today. If you spent years employed by a small shop, a neighborhood business, or a family-run operation, your record is precisely the type that tends to contain errors. Second, anyone who was ever self-employed, freelancers, independent contractors, anyone who ran their own business and paid self-employment tax. The way those earnings get reported leaves considerable room for a year to be recorded at an incorrect amount or to fail to appear on your record at all. If you worked for yourself at any point, even for just a handful of years, examine those years with extra care. Third, anyone who changed employers frequently throughout their career. Every time you started with a new company, that was another opportunity for someone in a payroll department to mistype a figure or enter your Social Security number incorrectly and inadvertently send your earnings somewhere they did not belong. The more positions you held over your working life, the more chances existed for something to go wrong. And fourth, and this one is significant and consistently overlooked, women who changed their last name following a marriage or a divorce when that name change was never properly updated with Social Security. Here's what happens in that situation. If the name your employer submitted on payroll reports does not match the name currently on file with Social Security, those earnings can fail to attach to your record at all. They sit somewhere inside the system, credited to nobody. Years of real work, real paychecks earned through your own effort, simply not being counted toward your payment. If you have ever changed your name at any point during your life, verifying this is one of the most important financial steps you will ever take. The zeros problem. There is one more element inside that statement that tends to genuinely surprise people, and it can carry significant financial value. If you have fewer than 35 years of earnings on your record, and many people do because they took time away to raise children, returned to school, cared for an aging parent, or held employment that was not covered by Social Security, the system does something you really need to understand. To reach 35 years, it fills every one of those gaps with a zero. And those zeros feed directly into your average and drag your payment down considerably. But here is where the opportunity lies. Sometimes those years are not actually empty. Sometimes you genuinely were working during that period and the earnings were simply never recorded correctly. Identifying even one real year of work sitting on your record as a zero and getting it corrected can add anywhere from $50 to $150 per month to your payment. Find 2 or 3 such years, and you are now looking at a meaningful, permanent raise that follows you for the rest of your life. Raymond's story. Let me give you a real picture of what this actually looks like in practice, because numbers alone do not always land the way a real example does. Picture a man I will call Raymond. Raymond spent 3 years during the late 1990s employed by a small construction company. Productive years, physically demanding work, respectable pay. Decades later, just as he was approaching retirement, someone finally suggested he pull up his Social Security statement and actually read through it. When he did, something stopped him cold. Those 3 years working construction were recorded at roughly 60% of what he had genuinely been paid. The owner had been processing payroll by hand, submitting incorrect figures year after year, and Raymond had never had any reason to suspect a thing. So he gathered the old paperwork he still had on hand, submitted a correction request, and his monthly payment increased by more than $300 for the rest of his life. That money had been sitting there uncollected for nearly 30 years, and the only thing that unlocked it was Raymond spending one afternoon opening a document and reading one particular section. Same Raymond, same work history. The only difference was that on that one afternoon, he decided to look. Margaret's story. Let me tell you about one more person, because her situation is the one that concerns me most, and may also be the most widespread of all. I will call her Margaret. Margaret married young, took her husband's last name, and worked for nearly 15 years under that name. Later in life, she divorced, changed her name again, and kept working. She never gave it much thought. Decades later, when she finally pulled up her statement, there was a stretch of years in the middle of her career where the earnings figures were far lower than she remembered, and a couple of years that were almost entirely blank. What had happened was both straightforward and deeply unfortunate. During those name transitions, some of her earnings had been submitted under a name that no longer matched her Social Security record, and that money never attached to her file. It had been suspended somewhere inside the system, credited to no one, for over 20 years. Real work, real paychecks, simply floating there uncounted, pulling her payment down the entire time. When she brought in her old tax returns and had the record corrected, her benefit increased meaningfully for the rest of her life. If you are a woman who has changed your name even once, I am speaking directly to you right now. Go and check this. You may be owed more than anyone else watching this video. Additional ways to increase your payment. Now, correcting an error represents the biggest single opportunity for many of you, but I promised you more than that, because not everyone has an error to find. So let me share several additional ways this document and the steps around it can put more money in your monthly check. Because the goal here is straightforward: every dollar you worked for, you should be receiving. The first method applies to nearly everyone and ties directly back to those zeros. If your record still contains 0 years among your top 35, you have the ability to replace them. Every additional year you work, even part-time, even later in life, has the potential to push one of those zeros out of your calculation and substitute a real figure in its place. Because the formula draws from your 35 highest years, One additional productive year can lift your average in ways people rarely anticipate. For some, a single additional year of work is worth considerably more to their monthly payment than they ever imagined. Second, the timing of when you claim matters enormously, and your statement shows you exactly what you need to understand this decision. If you have not yet started collecting your benefit, every year you delay past your full retirement age increases your payment by roughly 8% annually, all the way up to age 70. That is a guaranteed growth rate that simply does not exist anywhere else. Your statement lays out those projections so you can see precisely what waiting is actually worth in your specific situation. And third, if you are married, divorced after a long marriage, or widowed, there may be a larger benefit available to you than the one you are currently collecting on your own record. A spouse may be eligible to receive up to half of the higher earner's benefit. A widow or widower keeps whichever of the two checks is larger. People leave staggering sums behind here simply because they assume the payment they are already receiving is the only one available to them. It is absolutely worth a conversation with the SSA to find out. Every one of those paths is a legitimate route to a larger monthly payment, and every single one of them starts the same way, by opening that document and genuinely understanding what it is telling you. Step by step. Here is exactly what to do, broken down step by step. Write this down or simply watch this section a second time. But before the steps themselves, gather anything that reflects what you actually earned throughout your working years. Old W-2 forms, old tax returns, old pay stubs, even a reliable memory of which employers you worked for and during which years. Pull everything together into one folder before you sit down to do this. The more documentation you have available, the stronger your position will be if you need to submit a correction. And if there is a box of old financial paperwork sitting in a closet somewhere that you have been meaning to clear out, do not touch it until after you have completed this process. That box could be worth thousands of dollars to you. Step 1. Go to ssa.gov and create your My Social Security account if you do not already have one. It is completely free. It is the official government site, and the setup takes roughly 5 minutes. One important note: use only the real ssa.gov address. Do not click on an advertisement or a link that promises to walk you through this process for a fee. Step 2. Open your statement and navigate to the earnings history section. You will find a list of every year going back to your very first job, with a dollar figure beside each one. Step 3. And this is the step that actually produces results. Compare those figures year by year against your own personal records, your old W-2s, tax returns, pay stubs, whatever documentation you have held onto. You are specifically looking for 3 things: years where the figure is noticeably lower than what you actually earned, years that show a 0 when you know you were actively working, and years that appear to be missing from the list altogether. Move through this carefully and pay the closest attention to your highest earning years, because an error in a high earning year damages your check far more significantly than an error in a low one. Step 4. If something does not match, the form you need is called a Request for Correction of Earnings Record, available directly from Social Security. You submit it along with documentation proving what you actually earned. The most effective supporting evidence is your original W-2 forms. And here is something most people have no idea about. Even if you discarded your old paperwork years ago, the Social Security Administration can retrieve copies of your W-2 forms going all the way back to 1978 at no cost, when the purpose is correcting your earnings record. A missing shoebox of old tax documents is not a valid reason to leave this money uncollected. Step 5. Be patient, but stay persistent. Social Security typically works through these corrections within roughly 10 to 90 days. Once complete, your benefit is recalculated and the higher amount begins appearing in your payments going forward. There is a 3-year window for correcting recent errors with relative ease, but do not let that discourage you from pursuing an older one. Errors from 10, 20, even 30 years back can still be corrected when you have the right documentation. Never assume that because something happened a long time ago, it is too late to address it. If you have the proof, the correction is worth pursuing. For those not comfortable online. Now, I understand that some of you are hearing all of this and thinking, Walter, I am not comfortable with computers. I would not know where to begin with setting up an online account. I hear that completely, and I do not want that hesitation to be the thing that costs you thousands of dollars over your retirement. Here is what you can do instead. You do not have to handle any of this online, and you do not have to handle it alone. You can call Social Security directly at 1-800-772-1213 and request that they mail you a printed copy of your earnings statement and help you review your record. You can also walk into your nearest Social Security office in person, sit down with a real staff member, and have them pull everything up with you right there at the desk. And if you have a son, a daughter, a grandchild, or a trusted friend who is comfortable navigating websites, this is a genuinely worthwhile thing to ask them to help you with over a single afternoon together. There is no shame in asking for help. The only real mistake is letting the money stay uncollected because the process felt overwhelming. The benefit belongs to you regardless of how you access it, and there is always a path to get there. Scam warning. And let me offer one serious caution, because whenever there is money owed to older adults, someone tends to show up looking to take a portion of it. You should never have to pay anyone to do any part of this. Not a flat fee. Not a percentage of your recovery, nothing at all. Reviewing your statement and submitting a correction is a completely free process that you carry out directly with Social Security. If you ever encounter an advertisement or receive a phone call from a company promising to recover your Social Security money in exchange for a cut of it, end that call immediately. All they intend to do is follow the exact free steps I just walked you through and then pocket part of what is rightfully yours. The only resource you need is the real SSA.gov. For additional help, turn to a trusted family member or a legitimate advisor who does not work on commission. The guide. I recognize this is a considerable amount of information to hold on to at once. The statement, the earnings history, the 35-year average, the correction form, the additional strategies that can raise your payment. And I have had so many of you ask me to bring all of it together in one place, written in plain, everyday language, with the exact steps and exact forms laid out clearly so you can work through it at your own pace and actually get it done. So I did exactly that. It is called the Senior Money Playbook. It is a plain language guide written specifically for people over 65, readable on any phone, tablet, or computer, or printable if you prefer a physical copy. It covers this entire process, checking and correcting your earnings record, along with guidance on timing your claim, spousal and survivor strategies, Medicare programs, property tax relief, and the tax advantages I cover regularly on this channel. All of it paired with the concrete steps needed to actually claim what is yours. The link is in the description below. If this channel has ever helped you put even a single dollar back in your pocket, that guide will help you find many more. Closing. Let me bring everything back to the central point because I want you to genuinely act on this, not just nod along and move on. Your Social Security payment is built from decades of earnings data. If even one line of that data is wrong, your check is smaller than it ought to be, and it stays that way every single month until you find the problem and correct it. Nobody is coming to locate that error on your behalf. But the document that lets you check it yourself is free, sitting inside your account at this very moment, roughly 5 minutes away from you right now. Most people spend more time examining a grocery receipt than the one record that determines their income for the rest of their lives. Do not be counted among them. This is genuinely worth one afternoon of your time. So today, take this one action. Go to SSA.gov, open your statement, read through your earnings history one line at a time. And if anything fails to match what you know you actually earned, submit that correction request. That is the entire process. That is how a free 5-minute document becomes a larger monthly check for the rest of your life. And if this video was useful to you, do one thing for me in return. Share it with someone you care about who is receiving Social Security or approaching the age when they will, especially anyone who was self-employed, worked for a small business, or has ever changed their name. Those individuals are the most likely to be owed additional money and the least likely to know it exists. The government is not going to make that phone call to them, but you absolutely can. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so the next video reaches you the moment it goes live.